Chief Okuba dismissed the death as an accident, but his men refused to continue clearing the forest. Furious, he brought in workers from a neighboring village. He promised them double pay to finish the job. The new workers laughed at the villagers' fears and entered the forest. Parabotiai stayed near the grove, watching the new workers with unease. He felt the whispers again, louder and more urgent. "Protect us," they said. Parabotiai clenched his fists. "I don't know how," he shouted. But deep down, he knew the ancestors wouldn't let him ignore them. That night, Parabotiai dreamt of the same old man. This time, the man was angry. "You are wasting time," he said. "The longer you wait, the more lives will be lost. Act now, or face the consequences." Parabotiai woke up sweating, his heart pounding. The next day, another strange event occurred. The villagers' livestock began dying mysteriously. Chickens, goats, and cows dropped dead without explanation. Panic spread through Odenga. Even the villagers who supported Chief Okuba began to question whether the grove was truly cursed. Abani called another village meeting, urging the people to stop Chief Okuba. "The ancestors are warning us," she said. "If we do not act, Odenga will be destroyed." Some villagers agreed, but others were still swayed by Chief Okuba's promises of wealth and progress. Parabotiai stood at the back of the crowd, torn between fear and responsibility. He knew he had to do something, but he didn't know where to start. The whispers in his head were constant now, filling his thoughts day and night. Chief Okuba brought in even more workers, determined to finish the job. The villagers watched helplessly as the clearing moved closer to the grove. Abeni began preparing for a final ritual to summon the ancestors' help. She warned Parabotiai that time was running out. That night, Parabotiai entered the grove alone. He carried the carved figure Abeni had given him. The whispers surrounded him, louder than ever. "Show me what to do," he whispered. Suddenly, the wind picked up, and the trees seemed to move. The whispers became clear. "Fight for us," they said. Parabotiai felt a surge of energy coursing through his body. He didn't know what it meant, but he felt stronger and more determined than ever. He left the grove with a new sense of purpose, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Abeni revealed to Parabotiai that the ancestors would not act without a sacrifice. "To save the grove, you must give something precious," she said. Parabotiai frowned. "What do I have to give?" Abeni didn't answer. She only handed him a bowl and instructed him to prepare. Parabotiai spent the night in the grove, waiting for a sign. He thought about his family, his dreams, and the future he had hoped for. The whispers surrounded him, urging him to act. "What must I sacrifice?" he asked. The whispers gave no answer. Meanwhile, Chief Okuba's workers began cutting the first tree inside the sacred grove. The ground shook violently, and the sky darkened. The workers panicked, but Chief Okuba pushed them to continue. "It's just a storm," he shouted. But the villagers knew it was something more. Parabotiai returned to the village the next morning, his face pale. "I know what I have to do," he told Abeni. She nodded solemnly. "The ancestors have chosen you," she said. "Be strong." Parabotiai felt fear rising in his chest, but he pushed it down. That night, Parabotiai stood at the edge of the grove, holding the carved figure. He whispered a prayer to the ancestors, asking for their guidance. The wind picked up, and the whispers grew louder. Parabotiai closed his eyes, ready to make his sacrifice. Parabotiai entered the grove alone, clutching the carved figure. The air felt heavy, and the trees seemed to watch him. He walked to the ancient stone he had seen in his visions. "I'm here," he said. "What do you want from me?" The whispers surrounded him. "Prove your loyalty," they said. Parabotiai frowned. "How?" he asked. Suddenly, the ground beneath him cracked, and he fell into a dark cavern. He landed hard but unhurt. The whispers echoed around him, louder and more menacing. "This is your test," they said. Parabotia hesitated, doubt creeping into his mind. But then he remembered the visions of the burning village and the wailing shadows. He clenched his fist. "I won't abandon Odenga," he said firmly. The shadow disappeared, and the whispers grew louder, almost approving. The ground shook again, and Parabotia found himself back at the ancient stone. The carved figure in his hand glowed faintly. "You have passed the first test," the whisper said. "But the true challenge lies ahead." Parabotia nodded, ready for whatever was to come. The next day, Parabotia gathered the villagers. "We must stop Chief Okuba," he said. "The ancestors are angry. If we don't act now, we will lose everything." Some villagers supported him, but others were still hesitant. "What can we do against him?" they asked. Abeni stepped forward. "The ancestors will guide us," she said. "But we must be united." Slowly, more villagers joined Parabotia's side. They began planning how to confront Chief Okuba and his men without violence. The whispers in the grove grew louder, encouraging them. Meanwhile, Chief Okuba prepared to cut down the largest tree in the grove. He believed that removing it would break the villagers' faith. "Once the tree falls, they will forget their superstitions," he said. His workers hesitated but obeyed. That night, Parabotia stood at the edge of the grove, praying for guidance. The whispers surrounded him, urging him to act quickly. "The time is near," they said. Parabotia felt a sense of urgency, knowing that the final confrontation was coming. As the sun rose, the villagers gathered near the grove. They were ready to face Chief Okuba and protect their ancestral home. Parabotia stood at the front, holding the carved figure tightly. He didn't know what would happen, but he was determined to fight for Odenga. Chief Okuba arrived at the grove with his workers and guards. "Step aside," he said to the villagers. "This land belongs to me now." Parabotia stepped forward. "The grove is not yours to take," he said firmly. "Leave now, or face the ancestors' wrath." Chief Okuba laughed. "You're just a boy," he said. "What can you do?" He signaled his men to start cutting the trees. The villagers stood their ground, blocking the workers from entering the grove. Tension filled the air as both sides prepared for a standoff. Suddenly, the ground shook violently. The largest tree in the grove began to glow with an eerie light. The whispers grew louder, echoing across the village. Chief Okuba's men froze in fear. "What is happening?" they shouted. Chief Okuba tried to calm them, but he looked worried. Parabotia stepped forward, holding the carved figure. "This is your last chance," he said. "Leave the grove, or suffer the consequences." Chief Okuba hesitated, but his greed overpowered his fear. "Keep walking," he ordered his men. The villagers gasped as the workers moved toward the glowing tree. As the first axe struck the tree, a deafening roar filled the air. The sky darkened, and a powerful wind swept through Odenga. Shadows emerged from the grove, surrounding the workers. The villagers screamed as chaos erupted. Parabotia knew the final battle had begun. The whispers turned into a roar, shaking the ground beneath Odenga. The shadows encircled Chief Okuba, their forms shifting into figures of warriors, elders, and ancestors long gone. "You have defied us," they said. "The sacred grove is not yours to destroy." Chief Okuba trembled but tried to remain firm. "Leave this land." Parabotia shouted, his voice clear and powerful. The carved figure in his hand glowed brightly, its light piercing through the darkness. The shadows surged forward, forcing Chief Okuba to his knees. His guards abandoned him, running in terror as the villagers watched in awe. Chief Okuba tried to speak, but his voice failed him. The shadows began pulling him toward the grove. "I was only trying to help the village," he muttered. The ancestors' voices thundered, "Greed has blinded you. Your actions would have destroyed everything." The grove seemed alive with fury. Parabotiai stepped closer, holding the carved figure high. "Let him go," he said softly. The shadows paused, their forms flickering. "He must face justice in this world," Parabotiai continued. The whisper softened, and the shadows released Chief Okuba, leaving him shivering and broken on the ground. As the storm of whispers subsided, the glowing tree dimmed, and peace returned to the grove. The villagers knelt in gratitude, thanking the ancestors for their mercy. Parabotiai, holding the carved figure tightly, knew that his journey was far from over. The sacred grove was safe, for now. The villagers surrounded Chief Okuba, their anger mixed with fear. Some wanted to banish him immediately, while others believed he should face a more severe punishment. Parabotiai stood between them, urging calm. "The ancestors spared him," he said. "Let us not act in anger." Abini stepped forward, her voice firm. "Chief Okuba has caused great harm, but his fate is now in the hands of the ancestors and the council." The villagers murmured in agreement. Chief Okuba remained silent, his head bowed, too shaken to defend himself. The council met that evening to decide Chief Okuba's punishment. Parabotiai, though young, was invited to speak. "Chief Okuba has lost the respect of the ancestors and the village," he said. "But he can still redeem himself if he chooses to protect the grove instead of destroy it." The council decided to strip Chief Okuba of his title and wealth. He was ordered to live humbly and serve the village by planting trees and caring for the grove. It was a humiliating sentence, but one that gave him a chance for redemption. Chief Okuba accepted it without argument. That night, the grove was quiet. The villagers lit torches and gathered at its edge to pray. Parabotiai stood with Abani, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. The whispers were gone, but he could still sense the presence of the ancestors, watching over Odenga.